Today's episode is sponsored by No Baked Cookie Dough. Founded by Belmont alumni Megan and Jimmy Feeman, No Baked Cookie Dough crafts and sells edible cookie dough through their scoop shops, online store, and select retailers. Mention this podcast at a No Baked scoop shop or use code WHATIF for 50% off your online order. Visit nobaked.co for more information.
Welcome to the What If podcast. We're sharing an ever-growing collection of stories from the Belmont entrepreneur community to inspire you to start and keep going. I'm your host, Elizabeth Gortmaker. Here we go. Well, hey, Trevor, thanks for being on the podcast today. I'm excited to listen to your story.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah. All right. So I know you graduated Belmont in 2012. You studied computer science and audio engineering. And then you founded Soundstripe and launched that platform in 2016. But take us back to the beginning and, tell us a bit about your story of what is Soundstripe? What do you guys do? When did you launch this? What was your what if moment, if you will?
Sure. Yeah. I graduated in 2012, studied basically all the nerd subjects as much as I could. And then I toured for between 3 and 4 years, pretty much full time. And the whole time I toured, I worked remote as a software engineer, which at the time was not, that was not like the industry standard. So it was actually really tough to find a position that would be willing to let me work remotely, especially given I was green. I was straight out of college. I didn't have a ton of professional experience. I had one internship in web development in college. And that's what I was pursuing, is I wanted to work as a software engineer doing web apps. So I was fortunate enough to meet a guy, a longtime Nashvilleian. I think he's one of the unicorn. I think he's from here. But his name's Rob Humphreys. Great guy. He was, at the time, he was the CEO of a new, it was like a high school athlete, sports-based tech startup in town. It's kind of like a LinkedIn for high school athletes. Like you'd have a page with highlight videos and connect with college coaches and all that stuff. So I was having a really hard time landing a job. I had gotten far along in conversations with a few companies, but as soon as I brought up the prospect of touring, because the band I was in had just signed a record deal, so I knew that within the next 12 months, we were going to be on the road. But I just needed someone to give me a shot. Like I wanted to prove my work ethic and the fact that I could do both things, and it would still, like, I would be a full-time employee. Yeah. And especially being on the business side now, I totally get the hesitancy and reluctancy to do that. But I was introduced through someone from my internship to Rob. We had coffee, and he was like, "I want to help you pursue both dreams. Let's do it." So he hired me on as a junior software engineer. I eventually kind of worked my way up in that company to, I was a lead engineer by the time I kind of left that position, but he honored that. And by the time I started touring, when I was on the road, I worked remotely. When I was home, I was at the office if the band wasn't doing something. So really cool setup, and music is tough to make a living in. And so that allowed me to do what I love. And a few years later, I eventually moved into freelancing. I was working for an app agency owned by another friend of mine. Shout out to Chris McIntyre. He's awesome. He's another Nashville guy. I met through, I think at some point I had done like a freelance project for a client on the side. And he wanted to introduce me to two guys that had an app idea, which when you're a software engineer, literally everyone has an app idea. It's like, it's like if you tell someone you're a painter, everyone wants to show you the drawings they've done since they were 3 or something, And I was like, I was really busy. I was obviously touring. I had a retainer full-time position. I was actually working on a side hustle with another business partner, and I just couldn't commit to anything else. But he was like, my client was like, just trust me, you need to meet these guys. I was like, I'm always down to meet people. So worst case, maybe we'll make some friends, When I was home from tour, I got lunch with a guy named Micah Sannon, fell in love with him. Super jovial, boisterous, gregarious guy. He introduced me to his business partner, a guy named Travis Terrell. Fell in love with him too. They were very different people, but in the best ways, very complimentary. And they were still trying to figure out what they were going to do with music licensing, but they knew it would be in that vein. And so the idea wasn't really landed on yet, but I was like, I love these guys. And if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be them. I want to be a part of this. So, I worked on building our MVP, which stands for minimum viable product. And we did that on the side, launched it in February of 2016. And I came on as a co-founder with those two. Now we are about 6.5 years in. We have about 60 full-time employees. We're based in Nashville, but we have employees, I think, in like 16 or 18 states all around the country, and fully distributed. And we basically are part music company, part technology company. And it's a blast. I love what I get to do every day. I love the people I get to work with. It definitely makes the days that aren't so fun worth it for sure. So it's a joy to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So explain Soundstripe to us.
Sure.
In layman's terms. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was kind of the, I would say that, you asked, I think the question you asked was like a what if moment.
Uh-huh.
I definitely had that when I was in my band and we had started Soundstripe about a year in. I had to make the decision Soundstripe was growing rapidly, and I'll kind of get to what it does in a second, but I had to make the decision to leave what was my lifelong passion of touring and playing music to pursue this, or I needed to hand the reins to someone else because we were hired. We had like 6 or 7 employees at the time. I was still touring full time. And I knew I needed to make some changes, and it was really scary. I basically had to stomach like, okay, we'd had some awesome experiences in the band. Like I was very fortunate to be able to do that. But I was like, could I stomach if the next day my band gets on Jimmy Fallon or something? Like, would I be okay with having just left? Right.
Yeah.
And I did. I was like, yeah, I'm good with that. I'd be happy for them. And, now, if they had toured with Linkin Park, which is my all-time favorite band, I might not have felt the same. But I got to that point, and I said, the what if is too great here. I need to see what might be at the end of the road for Soundstripe. My passion was leading me towards that.
Yeah.
I loved playing music, but I was getting a little burned out on the road, and so I took a chance. I was like, okay, what if this other opportunity pans out in the way that we believe will? So I took a risk. I quit my band, focused on Soundstripe full time. We were still a small company. Again, we had 5 or 6 employees, but we had no capital funding. We were operating as a bootstrapped business in a market that was competition was heating up. Fundraising was starting with other companies. So it was scary. But what was exciting about it, what led me to that what if, is what we were doing. So Soundstripe is basically if you're familiar with stock music, a lot of times it gets equated to like elevator music. Like that was what I always thought of stock music, right? But there's some companies that kind of paved the way for changing that over the last like 10, 15 years. Music Bed is a good example if you've ever heard of them. They're like a click to license site for if you want to put music in your video. You need a synchronization license for that to legally put copyrighted material together like that. And they made it really simple. They had a form you could fill out. But even with businesses like that, we still felt like it was too complicated. There was a lot of, if you may have obtained a license, but then if your project blew up and got on broadcast TV, you had to come renegotiate it because your license didn't cover that or whatever. But the world of content creation was changing drastically. Like everybody with an iPhone was becoming a content creator, and you could take a video, throw it up on Instagram, and then it could be on a news outlet tomorrow because it went viral. So like that, we felt like that was kind of an antiquated model, and we wanted to do 2 things. It was really difficult to find great music and to license it affordably. That was tough. We wanted to solve that. The other side was, and I knew this intimately well, so did Micah and Travis, my business partners. They came from the music industry, touring and session musicians for years. We all knew what it was like and how difficult it was to make a living as a musician. And we wanted to try to to figure out a solution for that. We wanted to see if we could find a win-win-win for the customer, the business, and the artist. So, we launched Soundstripe as an affordable subscription offering, very like Netflix buffet style, right? You just pay the subscription fee. You can use any of our music in as many projects as you want, with no practical restrictions. I mean, if it gets in broadcast, awesome. If it's, for a client use, like we have like these tiered subscription offerings. It's really simple. Like you don't have to come renegotiate if your project blows up. You don't have to worry about what mediums you're putting it on. You're just on the plan that supports that, and anything you do works. So basically, we're like a reimagined stock music site. We do offer other stuff, stock sound effects, stock video footage. So if you're a videographer and let's say you're a wedding videographer, right? And you've got these great shots from the wedding, but you're like, wow, really wish I had like a drone shot of a field to open this thing up with or whatever. So we have that. So you can just splice it in and it fits your fitted, and no one's going to know what field it is that the drone's going over. It works. So we have tons of that kind of stuff. And that's really what it was. We wanted to bring a high level of quality to what was historically not known of being a high quality thing. We wanted to make it really affordable because budgets in the sync world have been going down with the advent of content creators. And we wanted to find a way to get artists paid. So we've gone through multiple iterations of what that looks like since we started Soundstripe, but that's really what we do. We're a software as a service, SaaS product that's tailored to content creators who need to pair music with video.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you guys are really simplifying what you saw in the market. Like, here's what our competitors are doing, but also here's some of the problems with all of it. Let's just simplify all of this and make it easier for everybody. I love where you said it's a win-win-win, for everybody involved.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, first of all, you keep mentioning that you love music and you played in this band. Tell us more. Like, who were you playing with?
Yeah. So, majority of my touring career was with a band called Viridia. We're based out of Nashville. We were started, I got in the band at the end of 2012, right before I graduated. But I don't know what our technical founding date is. It was a strange situation. We literally signed a record deal before we ever had a band name. We didn't know what genre we were going to be. It was like a very interesting situation. The label really believed in the vision for the band. And so that was which ironically was still being formulated, but our singer, her name's Dina. She's unbelievable. Her and the guitar player, Brandon, had already done a ton of writing and were trying to create this project. And so they believed in, whatever direction it went, they really believed in them. So, I got in the band, and for that whole time, we were signed to Word Records, which at the time was like an imprint label that was owned.
Yeah,
I think it was partial owned by Curb. Well, it was split between a few entities. Curb, Warner. There may have even been one more. I think now Curb owns the whole thing. They did a full buyout a year or two ago. But we were on Word. We were playing crossover. We did one weekend, we'd be out with Jeremy Camp. The next weekend, we'd be playing a festival with Ozzy Osbourne and Outkast and stuff. So it was all over. We did mainstream and Christian market. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, did that pretty much full time. Had checked so many things on my bucket list. It was just such an awesome experience. And the people I got to do it with were incredible. They're still some of my best friends today. While we were on the road too, everyone in the band kind of had their own thing. Brandon, the other guitar player, owns a social media marketing agency with, at the time, I think they had 15 or 20 employees, and he was touring full time and still managing that from the road. Our drummer, his name's Kyle Levy. He owns a custom woodworking business called Broken Compass Woodworking out of Nashville. He does incredible with that. Dina, our singer, she was doing hair and makeup for all sorts of stuff, music videos, artists, etc. She actually got really into, and I think she's still doing this right now, like baking and baked goods and stuff. Like that became like a passion project for her where she, turned a hobby into a paying thing.
Yep.
So we were all doing like things we were interested in. I was obviously working in software, building this business. That entrepreneurial spirit, I mean, a band is an entrepreneurial endeavor. It's a small business, right? So
for sure.
That like, but the cool thing about it is typically in a band, you always have like one person who's like that. And then everyone else is kind of just chills and like is there for, kind of shows up sometimes. It was never like that with us. Like we definitely had one or two people who ran the band and did most everything, but everyone was like committed there, very professional. And that was a really cool environment to work with because, one, it allowed us to be creative when we weren't having to worry about picking up slack from other members because I've been there in other bands. But two, it was really inspiring. Like I think it bled into other parts of our life, like other passions we had were in, your five closest friends or you are your five closest friends was very, very true when you're like on the road living with people all the time.
For sure.
So,
For sure. Yeah. I used to work in the music industry and it's totally true. Like what you said, like a band is a small business, and like the overlap and, obviously at Belmont, we have so many bands, so many musicians, like every student here plays guitar, plays something and is in some band. And, I'm always telling them like, that is entrepreneurial. Like you guys are out there, you're hustling, you're working so hard, you're owning all of it, you're managing all of it. Like all of those skills translate. So, doing whatever you do in college or in those recent years post-grad, like totally translates into what you're doing down the road. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your time at Belmont. So computer science, audio engineering, obviously it very much relates to what you're doing now, but tell us a little bit about how, your Belmont experience and education might have kind of led you to where you are, or if any of that kind of inspired you to launch Soundstripe later on.
Absolutely. There were a lot of things, honestly. I met, I don't really believe in coincidence. And there were a lot of things that happened. And everyone says this, but I think like opportunity and success is always a combination of like try hard and luck, like there's always right place, right time type stuff. So I was in multiple bands in college. Like I was just gigging with anyone I could that was in the genres I wanted to play in, At one point I was in a pop band. We did it was the first tour I'd ever done. It was like a 3-week summer tour that we self-promoted and did all our own stuff. And our drummer had just quit. He had gotten a full-time job. He was out of college already. And so one of the bands we were touring with had hired a drummer from Belmont. Ironically, me and him, I think we had met once, but we didn't even remember each other. So like, it was basically like we'd never met, but he had been hired by another band we were touring with. And we were like, hey, do you want to play in our set too? We don't have a drummer for this tour. He was like, yeah, sure. So through that, I got to become good friends with him. His name's Bryant Lowry. Through that situation, like he actually basically got me introduced to this other band that I got in, Viridia, later on. And that never would have happened without that one tour that we hired him on and we met, etc. And then even beyond that, while I was at Belmont, I was in a fraternity, Phi Delta Theta, RIP. It's unfortunately not at campus anymore, but it was a great experience. And I was president at the time, so I got a ton of like leadership experience through that and getting to, learn how to like, basically navigate, like get it going from being a high school student to like having much more responsibility. Right. So that was something I got a lot of value out of. And through that, one of our alumni actually became a friend of mine and he came out and saw Viridia play. We were signed to a record label, but we didn't have management, which is typically a no-no because you don't want to sign a record deal without some outside representation to protect you, to make sure they can go in and kind of flip tables over for you on your behalf without you being the bad guy. There's all sorts of like dynamics that a manager helps with, right? And we did not have management. He came out to our first show. Maybe it wasn't our first show, but it was a showcase we were doing in town as we were figuring out what our band was going to look like and all this. He came out and his words are he loved the show. He wanted to sign us on the spot. So he called his management partner, a guy named Scott Welch. And that guy's name is Mike Hagler, still a good friend of mine. At one point, Dolly Parton's like massive management organization. He was like kind of cut his teeth there a little bit. Yep. And then he'd started doing some side ventures with a guy named Scott Welch, who was a very successful manager. Scott is still a dear friend and mentor of mine as well. And he found Alanis Morissette. That was his early claim to fame is, I think Jagged Little Pill, her first record, still is the highest selling debut album of all time, like 38 million copies, like crazy. He was there through all that, worked with a ton of artists. And so Mike had become good friends with him. And he called Scott after that show and asked him, he's like, hey, I know you haven't seen this band play yet, but I really believe in them. Let's sign them before somebody else gets them or whatever. So they did. We went out, met with them, loved them, signed it, and they were mainstream management. So we wanted that to kind of balance out the fact that we were playing both markets. We had a Christian label, so we wanted mainstream management. And they were awesome. I that whole thing never would have happened without my Belmont fraternity experience. Like I never would have met Mike. A lot of serendipitous, kind of like synchronicity stuff there for sure. Very cool. And in addition, some of my good friends to this day were buddies or roommates that I had met at Belmont. And a lot of I clearly, even with this little podcast setup, I use a lot of my audio experience that I got there. My business is half audio, half tech. So I get to use a lot that I learned on my own, but also in class at Belmont, just being surrounded by the audio community. So that has helped my career in so many ways, but also the computer science side, that became a huge passion of mine that I would not have gotten involved with had it not been for my roommate at Belmont that was like, hey, you should try a programming course. It takes the place of your first math credit. And I was like, sick. That sounds great. So did that, loved it. And then I actually finished my computer science major before my audio major. I fell deep into it. I loved it.
Yeah.
And that has literally charted the course of my career. I mean, my entire career has been in and around software engineering, and that would not have happened without Belmont. So just so many things. I mean, I had a great experience at the campus, not just with the school and the departments. Big shouts to computer science and the audio department, but also with the people I met there, and what taking advantage of I hate to use the word networking, but getting to know people that was huge. That was huge.
Yeah. I know. I just love those stories because it seems like everyone has, whether it was a study abroad experience or someone they knew or some class that they took that they weren't even planning on. And you can look back, in retrospect, 10 years later for you, and it's, you see where it all kind of came together and how it really propelled you to where you are today. I just love that. And working with college students today, they don't know what 10 years down the road is going to look like, or 20. But it's so much about who you know, and not just in that networking, like you were saying, it's ugh, we hate networking, know?
Yeah, totally.
But the beauty of Belmont is it's this small, big school, right in the middle of everything. And these relationships are so important, and they really change such of the trajectory for us. But okay, back to Soundstripe, because we could talk all day about all that, but there's so much I want to dig into with Soundstripe. You were telling us early on, when you kind of made the leap, you had about 6 employees, and today you've got 60 full-time employees. What has that growth been like? What is it like to grow your team? Tell us just all about that, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think I mentioned this, but we were bootstrapped for the first 2 years. So we basically were just working other jobs to pay the bills while we were trying to get off the ground. All the money that was coming in from the business, we'd put back into the business. And then eventually we started kind of paying ourselves, but not enough. And then, we did the whole thing to try to really build it from the ground up. We wanted to create value because candidly, early on, we had a hard time raising capital. That's a big thing with starting a new venture is like venture capital, or you will not get a loan from a bank, period. Like it ain't happening. So at least not anything meaningful. There's small business loans and stuff like that, but we were really trying to come out of the gate as a high growth company. And like a $5,000 or $10,000 business loan wasn't going to do us anything. We were looking for like $500,000 to a couple $1,000,000 to really try to pour into some marketing success we had seen with the business. So, early on we were bootstrapped. We were kind of just, and we did stuff like the first year. We're like, okay, the customers who we know would benefit from this right out of the gate are wedding videographers, because they do work every weekend, right? But they don't have big budgets, especially ones that aren't at like the top of their game yet. So we could provide a ton of music for them at an affordable price on a consistent basis. That's a great customer. Another was churches, actually, because churches do like streaming services, and Facebook and YouTube will shut you down if you use copyrighted material in your streaming service. It doesn't matter if it's for God or whatever, like they don't care, right? They're just going to shut it down because copyright. So that was a customer of ours. And literally I think we paid someone on like Upwork to go through and look at, find wedding videographers that had profiles on the knot.com, the wedding registry site.
Yeah. And
just compile hundreds of email addresses. And then we manually reached out to all of them, and we got our first 1,000 subscribers that way. Yeah. So, and this was like at the time, it was a $10 a month subscription. So it's not like the ROI was there for us to do this, but we just tried to do things that didn't scale until we needed to scale them. Right. So we tried to be scrappy and just try things. We would send like handwritten letters to everyone that signed up for an account. We would send like Micah, my business partner, created these wood-burned wooden lamps with our logo on them, and we would send them to customers. We were probably losing more money doing all this stuff, but the idea was we wanted to create customers for life that weren't just like because we were a subscription product. We didn't want it to be a transactional relationship. We wanted it to be like a really valuable part of their workflow. So we did that early on, and that afforded us the opportunity eventually to go out and raise some capital, which is when we decided the market's heating up. We want to build a bigger team, because we never thought we'd have more than 15 employees, even like 5 years down the road. We're like, never, But as the business was growing, within 2 years, we hit about a little over $1 million in annual revenue. And we decided like, okay, the market is actually growing faster than we thought due to stuff like TikTok coming to play, Instagram launching videos and reels. So we raised a $500,000 seed round in February of 2018, which we could do a whole call on how to do that, because that is very tough. But the idea behind that was we wanted to do two things. We wanted to staff up our company to really try to scale this and bring on people with skill sets that we didn't have, like marketing expertise in certain areas. And we also wanted to build out our music acquisition side. We were trying an experiment where we were going to staff some musicians and then contract some others and see what happened. Like, could we create a W-2 position for musicians, right? So we did that, raised $500,000. I think at the time we brought on 8 musicians, I believe. And then we also staffed up our post-production side. So we do all of our mixing and mastering for the audio stuff in-house. Cool. And we have like platinum selling record producer, Grammy award-winning mix engineer, like awesome talent on staff. And that was through the network we had built over the years, through the bands we were in, and like our relationships through Belmont and otherwise. As we kind of grew the team and the product was growing, we doubled our team size a couple years in a row, I think, and got to, we got to a point where we started taking a look at, with our market getting more competitive and such. We also had, we had some projects that were working really well, some weren't so much. And so we had things, we've just as many good times as we've had. We've also had tough decisions to make. We have done layoffs before, and that is literally one of the most painful things you can do. Yeah. Not even as like a, because honestly, I'm sure you've seen this on LinkedIn, but that like crying CEO guy, like that was like, I just had to lay off everyone. not in that kind of way, but just in a like, when you go into situations like that, that these people are friends of yours. Like I literally have worked with friends of mine, so like when you have to do something like this, it is no matter how much separation between professional and personal there is, it still feels personal on the other side. And it's a tough thing. And I think the big like foundational common denominators that we've had as we've grown our team, and I think this is just important for me to emphasize here, is that even though we're a much bigger company than we used to be, and at this stage we've seen ups and downs and all the above, we're almost a 7-year-old company at this point. The main thing was that before we ever hired an employee or even had a customer, it's kind of a funny story here, actually. Me and Micah, when we worked out of Travis's bedroom when we first started the business. So we went over one day, we're like getting ready to work, and he's like, hey, I want to show you something. So we sit down and he pulls up a PDF that was like 40 pages long. And it was this culture deck he had written. And we were like, yeah, this is cool. Like we don't even have a customer, much less an employee. Like, what are we going to do with this? And he's like, I'm telling you, this will be valuable.
Yeah.
And never have I ever put my foot in my mouth more, because that is the single most important thing we did as a business, was aligning our North Star before we ever brought on additional team members. Because when we did start to scale, where we were doubling our team size every year, the only way to like keep that in check and really make sure that the people you're hiring are aligned with you and are building your team and keeping the culture that you want is to make sure that they're aligned with the values that your business stands for. Yeah. And like we always said, like every Enron had core values on their wall, and one of them was integrity, right? So like you can say a lot of things. I'm not saying that, but what was important is that we would call on our core values in meetings, even at board level stuff with investors. We would be like, hey, like one of our core values here is done is better than perfect. We need to just get this launched, right? Another is keep it light. We're not building heart monitors. There is like, thankfully, we don't have to deal with the stress of something like that. So if the site goes down, as long as we're within our uptime contracts for our enterprise customers, like there's nothing to freak out about. It's okay. So those kind of things like helped keep us centered as we continued to grow. Another is be humble and retain a giving and serving heart and mind. Like that one was, there's no ego here. I was in the music industry too, and the worst part about it was the ego. Thankfully, I didn't have any of that in my band. And many of the bands I toured with didn't either. But there were some like, holy cow. I mean, the whole diva thing is very real. I saw that. And we did not want that in our company. None of us did. And especially as we started to delve more into, working with like people who, at least the way we saw it, we started eventually, we started hiring seasoned executives. So people that had done this before that could help us grow to the next level. Right. And that was really tough to find the right people, because we didn't want someone who was just a corporate suit to come in and jack things up. But we also didn't want someone who didn't have that experience, because like at every stage, that's the furthest we've ever been, right? Like I've never done this before. Right. So it was tough to find a balance between someone who like aligned with what we care about, how we want to run our business, and could still help challenge us in areas that weren't misaligned with our ethics or core values or whatever. I'm thankful to say we have a team that through a lot of painstaking deliberation over candidates and stuff, we have managed to do that. But it's very tough. And I point back to Travis writing that culture deck early on. We gave that to everybody that came on board, like as part of the interview process, like read these out loud. Tell me what they mean to you. Like anything stand out. You'd be surprised what you can tell when you just discuss things like that. You could quickly, easily like determine if someone was kind of the classic power trip manager, right? Like we didn't want that ego. Yeah. so that was hugely beneficial for growing a team early on.
Today's episode is sponsored by No Baked Cookie Dough. Founded in 2017 by Belmont alumni Megan and Jimmy Feeman, its mission is to make chef-driven and flavor-first snacks. No Baked Cookie Dough crafts and sells edible cookie dough through their scoop shops, online store, and select retailers through the Midwest and Southeast United States. Mention this podcast at a No Baked scoop shop or use code WHATIF for 50% off your online order. Visit nobaked.co for more information.
Yeah, it's one of the most challenging things I've seen is just like building the team and making sure you have the right dynamic within the team because like you're saying, culture can make or break you.
Yeah.
For sure. And I know you talk about your team, you're really looking for people who can challenge the status quo and that, Soundstripe, like you guys are changing what is out there. You've got to have like entrepreneurial thinkers and people who can really think outside the box and solve problems. But they also have to have a skill set. There's a certain level of training you can do, but you also need people to come in with a certain skill set already in place. And then the rapid growth too. You guys have been since 2016. So, what's that, 6 years? And you've, 10 times the number of employees. So I can imagine just so many challenges within that whole process, but it seems like you guys have just done it really, really well. Do you attribute that back to having that culture deck and focusing on that so heavily from the start? Or do you have any other thoughts or advice for other entrepreneurs in your situation who are trying to build out a team and are trying to figure out like, what is our common voice or the North Star, like you said?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I do, because even the additional context I'll give there comes back to the core values. So one of them is develop and practice honest communication. That's one of our values. And that has actually been one of the single most important things as we've grown because the truth is we haven't done everything perfectly. Like there have been times where we have mismanaged situations or not handled things, not out of malintent by any way, but like make mistakes. We're human, right? Like we're people running a business. It happens at all levels of management and contributorship. So having that open, candid feedback from top down and bottom up has been huge because like I ask directly to the people that report to me, like, tell me where I'm screwing up. Like, where can I do better? Like, how can I manage you better? How can I help you hit your career goals better? Because there's a lot of focus on the top down side, which is like, here's our goals and our KPIs and our OKRs and like what you need to focus on and hit, and we'll keep you accountable. And here's the areas you could improve and all this. That same thing needs to go the other way because it's really easy to get in an echo chamber when you don't have the bottom up feedback cycle. And that's been really important because candidly, times where we've messed up, our team is pretty straightforward about like, you dropped the ball here. This was not handled or whatever. Right. And I totally appreciate that because 90% of the time it's just a missed perspective. You're like, holy crap. Like I did not even see it that way. Or you're 100% right. I'm sorry. Or it's I can see where you're coming from, but here's actually my perspective on this, right? Like those are great conversations to have because you have to, like the definition of trust that I love to go back to is consistency over time, right? Like that's what building trust is. And the only way to do that is to have like the hard, candid conversations, to be willing to say, yes, I was wrong, potentially to even have debates where necessary, but to be open to like, recognizing that we are all people. And as long as we know that we are doing the best we can to not violate the values that we say are our North Star across the company, then we're all rowing in the same direction. We're all headed towards the same thing. And I think that is one of the most impactful areas that I think the core values have been helpful in is making sure that none of us get too big for our britches where we can't hear that feedback the other way,
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to brag on you a little bit because I know you probably won't go there yourself because you're humble about this, but you guys have received some really great attention and some great press. You've been listed on Nashville Business Journal's 40 Under 40. I know Soundstripe was in was it like number 68 on fastest growing companies with Inc. 5000, and just a handful of other accolades and rewards that you guys have received. It's really incredible to see such a young company and how much success you guys have already seen. Talk to us a little bit about finding such success at a young age, and what are some of the growth moments that you've had over the last 6 years or 10 years since you graduated from Belmont? And, what is it like to be a young leader who's doing something that's really working? I know it's amazing and it's challenging, but talk to us a little bit about your growth through all of this.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Seriously. It's definitely, very humbling. Like the most rewarding part of the job and the most difficult is people. Again, like that is, and so a lot of these things, like the top workplace in Tennessee awards and stuff like that, those are done through a third party that does anonymous surveying of our employees. So we don't see any of that until it comes out. And that is really humbling to see some of the feedback, from people of like what their genuine, honest experience is. And, having a part in that is, again, every business has good and bad days. And like, that's the kind of stuff that makes it worth it, because we're building a product that's helping people's lives, but it's not just our customers, right? Like we are, our business is not to provide jobs. Like that's not our business is to create the product we're focused on, but an amazing byproduct is being able to provide jobs. Mm-hmm. So that's such a rewarding thing. And being able to make sure that is like, I know for me at least, like, I take that really seriously, because I think that, it is something to, when you wind up employing someone, it's not just that they're working for your company and you're like exchanging a salary for time and work and all that stuff. It's also like they're spending a lot of their life with you. Like there's a lot of, we're at work majority of the time. Yeah. And so I take a lot of pride in that when I look at like, if someone really is enjoying what they're doing, like that energizes me. I want people to be in a place where they're in their sweet spot. They feel like they like the people they work with. They like the work they're doing. They like how they're being compensated, X, Y, Z. And, another important thing, even to the stuff you were talking about, like our growth as a company and such, I think there's some intangibles there that are like reasons that people have stuck around through hard times and things like that. I don't know specifically. I'm not in everyone's head, but I do know that we do try to go above and beyond for like, we have a really flexible vacation policy. So like, if you just need a mental health day tomorrow, take it, all good, and like, of course, especially if there's big projects going on, we would love, like, we try to have like, hey, let us know ahead of time if you want to take off or whatever, but there's no like, no more than 3 weeks a year or any of that stuff. It's a very flexible vacation policy. We also, like, as we've grown, we've been able to add things like, medical, dental, 401k, like all that kind of stuff. And that's, again, that goes back to the really rewarding thing, because you're not just helping people like, it's not just their job and their compensation. You're also like setting them up for future success. Like you're giving them opportunities. Like healthcare is a big one, but also it was really cool to me. I think it was last year when we just first opened up our 401k, allowing people to like put aside for their future and stuff. And a lot of people haven't worked, that we've worked with, haven't worked in a corporate environment for, because sometimes we're working with musicians, like they've been freelance forever. That kind of stuff is super rewarding. And I think that any of, while it is like of course, like it's definitely very heartwarming to get like a pat on the back per se for a lot of that stuff. It's also like, it should be more common than it is to do some of this stuff, because we're not really doing anything too novel on that side. We're just trying to be people, working with people, treating people like people. It's like very straightforward in my eyes, for sure.
Okay, so kind of going along with that, like what do you see as the future of the music industry? And more specifically, how is Soundstripe stepping into like creating solutions for things that have been problems for long times. I know you care a lot about creators, and one thing you say is like, we want to keep creators creating. So how are you guys thinking about the future? How are y'all going to be solving problems for everyone in the mix, but like specifically for the music industry and for those that are like creating, which is really the heartbeat of the music industry, but sometimes those are the people who are the most forgotten within the whole industry.
Yeah. I'll kind of tell you a little bit about how we do our music acquisition, because it's actually part of that. So we had all been, and this is no shade, honestly, to my record label, but we had a 360 deal, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. And, like, we knew what we were getting ourselves into. There was no veil pulled over our eyes. So there was, by all means, there was no big bad record label situation for us. But the longer we were in the band, we realized we had a lot less control over things than we wanted, right? So there was like, through that, I learned things that had like, if I was going to get into the record business side, what I would want it to look like. And same with Mike and Travis. We'd all kind of seen that before. So early on when I mentioned our seed round was part to hire employees, part to build out our music side, which included hiring employees. But part of that was we wanted to start buying music, because up to that point, we were just a marketplace for the first couple years. We'd basically source music from artists, and then we would do like a rev share type thing based on how much money came in the business. The downside to that was a fewfold. It was, we had no control over the content we were getting. We could curate what was coming in, but we couldn't like for instance, if I'm doing a rev share with you based on how well your music does, and then I ask you to do some like very niche subgenre music the next month and submit it, like I'm directly affecting your paycheck. Why wouldn't you just make like a inspiring corporate tune that's going to get used 1 million times with a ukulele in it, like that kind of stuff. And we were like, it's hurting our customers. It's hurting our ability to grow this business, which in turn affects our ability to pay artists and to make this bigger. Right. So we decided we wanted, and we didn't have much quality control, because people would just like, we'd get a lot of good stuff, but we'd also get a lot of spaghetti thrown at the wall that we had to sift through from artists. So we're like, okay, can we figure out, as I mentioned before, a win-win-win for the business, the customer, and the artist? So Micah, my business partner, worked up what was originally our music acquisition contract. And I think it was for when we were trying the staff positions for musicians. So really it boiled down to like, all right, we're going to staff these musicians. We're going to take all the responsibility of mixing and mastering and all that away from them. All they have to do is compose and send it in, right? We had specific turn-in specifications we needed to make sure it's up to like film standard, because some of our customers' projects go to Netflix and that kind of stuff. But outside of that, we're like, all right, we'll let them do what they do best, which is arrange and compose. And then we will handle everything else. We will make it sound like $1 million. We'll get it mixed and mastered. We're going to buy the rights to it. So we do own all the rights to all the music in our catalog, and we have never been shy about that. So it's not like there's never been a wool pulled over anybody's eyes. The way we do it, and the way we did a win-win, was the contract was very straightforward. Like we kind of modeled it after software engineering, because my experience was I can build my own apps. I know how to do that, right? Or I can have some stability and work for a company and exchange the IP I'm building for a salary. Like that did not exist in music, because, and this is a hot take here, but it's one I fully stand behind. There is this rhetoric that you have to own all your rights forever, but then you've got 99% of the artist population whose value of their songs financially is next to nothing. So you wind up having 100% of nothing, right? And like, that to me doesn't serve anybody. So yes, there is 100% a subset of the artist community. If they're trying to be their own brand, if they're trying to build their artistry, if just like starting a small business, right? If they want to do that route, that exists. But there didn't exist another option. We had friends who had been in music for 25 years that have, a marriage, kids, mortgage, and they're like, I just want to make music from 9 to 5. I don't give a damn about owning all the rights to everything. I don't care. because I have this massive hard drive of 200 songs that never got picked up by an ad agency. And so
no one's going to ever hear it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's worthless, like you said. Yeah.
100%. That being said, if you're an artist and you write a banger and you want to try to put it on Spotify, whatever, we wanted to allow you that freedom too. So what we did is we structured it to where it's a work for hire. We say like, we want to buy, like maybe you're a EDM DJ, right? Mm-hmm. So we know your stuff. We're like, awesome. We love this genre. If you could do like X number of tracks per month, here's what we'd be willing to pay up front as a flat fee. In addition, we let them collect the songwriter share of performance royalties. So if it gets picked up in a broadcast thing, that's like a thank you if it blows up, right? If your song gets on the Super Bowl and there's a check there, you're going to get essentially half that revenue. We get the publishing share, you get the writer share. Okay, so that was part of it. The other was, because it's a work for hire, as long as we had the right to buy this music and we weren't infringing on any other deals you have, I don't care if you have a record deal. Like, you can do whatever. We'll make a new artist moniker for you or whatever you need to do to keep those separate and not infringe on whatever you're doing. And this was cool because like we worked with a buddy of mine who had a record deal in Europe, but he was full-time with us for a while and basically did like, turn in a bunch of music to us, but anything that he wanted to be under his main project, which had a big following and did really well on Spotify and was like a source of income for him, that was all good. Basically, whatever you turn into us, we buy outright, point blank. Very simple. If you don't want us to own it, don't send it to us. Very simple, right? So it's the same way that I would do apps as an engineer. If I'm hired to build something, I'll do it. But if I build my own thing, I don't have to sell that to anybody. That's kind of how we built it in. And that is, it's served us really well up to this point. We've iterated on the model a few times, et cetera, but we feel like it meets a need. And now we're not working with tens of thousands of artists, right? We're not that big of a business yet, but we do work over the years, we've worked with hundreds and, it provides a meaningful source of income for people. Yeah. Again, we have multiple different models. It's not all just staffed musicians. We actually do a lot of contract work where we'll put someone on like a rotating contract for a few months. This works great even for touring musicians who like maybe they're on the road and they can compose when they're in the van or the bus or whatever and make some extra cash. And it also allows you to, because a lot of people that I toured with outside of our band in particular, if they didn't have their own venture, when they would get home, even if their band was successful, they were typically working as a waiter or had 2 or 3 other jobs, right? And that got exacerbated by stuff like the pandemic, of course, when no one was on the road. But that we wanted to provide a way where we were not trying to make anyone the next Katy Perry. That route exists. You go own your music, you do that, whatever. This is a different option. And if you want to make supplemental income in music, you can sell your content to us. And this is a cool way to do that if we're all aligned, So we just wanted to provide another, to me, I don't understand. It's existed some in like production houses before, but it's never been to a degree that like graphic design is another good example. You can, you see people with NFTs and stuff now, you can own all the rights to your stuff and try to monetize it however you want, or you could do a logo for a business and sell it outright to them. Like, I just couldn't get over, like, why does this not exist like this for musicians? It should be an option. And I genuinely believe, again, that hot take, that it's because there's so much rhetoric around own your rights, own your rights, own your rights, without any context. Because a lot of artists that I knew, and this is just the nature of being in the business. By doing it yourself, you're kind of learning by the school of hard knocks, right? So the business acumen that you're learning is kind of through getting screwed over. It happened a lot, right? Yeah. So when you hear own your rights, you're like, yeah, I'm doing that because I'm going to avoid all this crap I've dealt with elsewhere, right? But it makes this weird dynamic in the industry where it makes it hard to break out of all these problems we keep hearing about and try to get creative with ways to make money in an ever-changing industry. So that was something that was important to me, is like, let's provide another offering, be very upfront about it. Yeah. And for people that it works for, awesome. For people that it doesn't, awesome.
It's so interesting. Like, you're right about the rhetoric, because I initially think that as well. Of like, no way, you got to own it. Like, respecting the artist means like they can own their craft, their art, But at the same time, like all the other analogies you gave of other industries. And at the end of the day, like there cannot be a one size fits all
Right.
in the music industry. That is such a weird, complex, ever changing industry as is. Like to think there is a one size fits all for all creators. It does not lead to success for all creators. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. That's really interesting. So what's the future of Soundstripe?
Yeah. So probably biggest is that we have, up to this point, we've had a big, what we think of as like a B2C or B to SMB, like small business offering. But as our reach has expanded, we are really trying to kind of capitalize on the audience we have now. So we're now offering more products to enterprise companies. So we have some big like Fortune 500 brands that have accounts with us that we serve uniquely. We also are expanding, like now we have a creator tier plan, which is more geared towards like upstart creators that are just doing YouTube or something, right? So we're like, as we learn more and more about our customer and as this market changes, we're trying to just adapt our business models to fit that and the products that we're serving them. So the future for us looks like a whole lot of change and iteration. I love it. It's like what keeps us agile and nimble, and we're faster than our competitors and all that stuff. Like that's what's really fun and exciting to me. Like we launched, good example of this. I think we launched it 2 years ago. We launched an extension for Twitch, which basically allows streamers to, because they were experiencing the same problems that YouTube had when it first started. People, all of a sudden, labels started seeing all these people using their music and started filing copyright takedowns. Yeah. So we just put up a free extension that you can literally load up some playlists, hit play, and let it run behind your stream with no copyright takedowns. And that's the kind of stuff we're constantly trying out, new markets, new ways to meet our creators where they're at. And that's really exciting to me. I think our future looks a lot like meeting our customers where they're at. That's probably a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So I'm sure, you graduated 10 years ago, and I'm sure if you would have...
Weird to think about. Yeah.
I know, but 10 years ago, here's this musician, computer science, audio engineering guy. Like you probably would have never imagined where you are today.
Yeah.
Running such a massive company and owning all of this. You're the founder, one of the founders of this business. But what would be your advice to young entrepreneurs who might be listening to this podcast or who are just starting out with an idea, who cannot imagine what 10 years down the road will look like? But they want to be there. What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, specifically to young entrepreneurs, people in college, there is something special about this time in your life where your 20s are kind of like, you can just go try stuff and it doesn't work. You got plenty of time left ahead of you, So that served me well, and I think is really important for, like, I was always, to be honest, just overloading my schedule with stuff, trying everything I could, playing in every band I could, saying yes to way too many opportunities. Do I recommend doing that your whole life? No. At this point, I work a 9 to 5. I have a baby. Like I try to keep it. It's a very, normal work schedule for me now, but it used to not be like that. And you do have to put in the work. Like you've got to be willing to, there's typically no easy route. And just like asking, how do you sign a record deal? Everyone's story to starting and growing a business is totally different. Yeah. So the thing I'll say, though, for young entrepreneurs is be open to opportunity, lean towards saying yes more than you do no. There will come a time in your life where the things you say no to are more important than the things you say yes to. But I would argue that you're better off saying yes to the majority of stuff through your late teens and early 20s, all of your 20s probably. But the other thing is that whatever you're passionate about, we got told, and I know that everyone says like, there's the classic, like ignore all the, I don't even know what to call it, but basically like a good example is we met with publishing companies when we had the idea for Soundstripe, and we got literally laughed out of the room at almost all of them. They were like, no one's going to pay $10 a month for this music from artists they've never heard of to do whatever you think they're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And so that's why we couldn't raise capital early on. So we're like, fine, we'll build it ourselves and see if it works, you know? That kind of like, now there's something to be said for like, you know, it's the classic, like if you can't sing and no one's told you can't sing, that's unfortunate type thing. Like sometimes it's okay to listen to advice, but at the same time, if you believe in something in your soul and you're like, no, we are onto something here until I see otherwise, pursue that stuff. Like be hungry, go get it. And again, if I had like one underlying piece of advice, it is to be nice to everyone, even people you don't like, people that are jerks to you. Just skirt all that. Like, don't bother. Like, and I'm not even saying put on a front. I mean, be genuinely nice. Like, just try to assume that they're having a bad day or whatever. That has served me so well because literally, I can't even count the number of times where that kind of thing has happened. And then 5 years later, I've gotten into some business relationship with someone and I learned what was going on in their life. And I'm like, wow, I probably would have been the same way. Or they make a meaningful connection to me. Maybe it's someone I wouldn't want to work with, but maybe there's still like mutual benefit there later on or whatever. Like definitely kindness. It's very important in the music industry in particular, because music industry is very small. So everyone talks, but that will take you so far. And it's the same thing as when we were touring, we always used to hear and we used to say, I would much rather hire someone to come on the road with us that's a good hang, that's not as good as someone else, than bring the egotistical maniac on the road who's a shredder, right? Like that, I had no interest in touring with people like that because it is grating. And that same thing is true in any professional walk of life. So take that to heart. Be the person you would want to be around, work with, etc.
Totally. Man, well, Trevor, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I wish we had more time, but thank you for all your stories. And you are we love what you're doing. We love how much success you found and how much you're growing, but really like that at the end of the day, like you are just such a nice person. And I know that has been a lot of the success you've seen is exactly all you've said, is the relationships and the hard work and genuinely being someone that people want to work with. So thank you for inspiring our students and keep up the great work.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on this. And again, I couldn't be more grateful for my time at Belmont. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to give back a little here. And I love what you guys are doing, especially with this podcast.
Whatever your career dreams are, we can teach you to be both creative and innovative in how you solve business challenges. With 13 undergraduate and 4 graduate programs of study in Belmont's Massey College of Business, there's a program for you. Will you be our next success story? Find out more at belmont.edu/business.
Yeah, dude. Okay, I forgot. We've got some rapid fire questions before we go.
Okay. Let's do it.
You already said the first one, but I'm going to ask it again. What's your favorite band?
Linkin Park. Yeah. Yep. A close second, I will say, is Bring Me the Horizon. So I'll give you 2. There you go.
Okay. I haven't heard of them, but Linkin Park takes me back to 2002. Like,
yeah, it does.
So hard.
That's awesome. Love it.
Okay. What's the last song that you listened to?
Oh, gosh. It would be... oh, gosh. This is cat out of the bag here, actually. This is awesome. You're going to put me on the spot without even knowing it. So... surprise to anyone that hears this podcast that I work with, because I haven't told anybody yet. But it was actually a Viridia song because I'm going back on a 2-week tour with them in Europe in November for fun. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Oh, cool. That's going to be so fun.
Yeah. It'll be a little memory lane trip for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can probably guess the answer to this next question, but when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A musician. By the time I was like 11 or 12. Yeah. Musician.
Yeah. You're like, this is it.
Yeah,
Interesting. I just read a thing yesterday that's the time. Like when a kid is 11 and 12, that's kind of when they decide. And especially if they play music, like around age 11 is when they'll start to identify themselves as a musician.
Wow,
not just like,
cool.
I'm learning piano, but at age 11 is when they're like, I am a musician.
I love that. That's cool. That's cool.
I'm married to one, so I'm
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel for you. Hey, what's the best and the worst thing about Nashville?
Oh gosh. Okay. The best thing is the people. Everyone is awesome. Really cool community. Everyone's willing to get plugged in and plug you in, etc. the worst thing, in my opinion, is the majority of downtown. I do not. I haven't been to a bar in downtown.
Broadway.
Oh my God.
Broadway.
Like, I am so glad that people enjoy that, but I stay away as hard as possible. Yeah.
I promise every time I go downtown, there's some new version of a pedal tavern that they keep getting weirder.
Yeah, it's like a hot tub with pedals on it. Yeah, whatever.
How is this legal? How is this a thing?
Yeah, let's get drunk and exercise. That sounds great.
Or sit in a hot tub in the back of a thing that dries. Yeah, it's bad.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Where are we going to see you in 5 years?
Oh, gosh. Hopefully still in Nashville. And hopefully doing more of what I'm doing today. But I will say, too, that, like, I am a very... I love art of all kinds. And something that's been a passion project for me is I would love to, at some point, write a novel. I would love to try my hand a little more at drawing. That was a passion project as a kid. So hopefully you'll be seeing me, one, still doing what I'm doing today, but two, with a little more, with even more hobbies than I have today.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Well, Trevor, thanks again for being on here today. And we can't wait to see where you go next.
Thanks so much. Thanks for all the support. I really appreciate it.
Totally. Thanks for listening. What If is produced by Old Soul. For links and show notes, please visit belmontetp.com/whatif. Until next time, keep asking what if.